Welcome to the Jersey Justice Podcast, featuring your hosts, attorneys Gerald Clark and Mark Morris.
So, Judge John D'Amico, an old friend, mentor, and old boss, thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
You look awesome, I have to say. I haven't seen you in a while. You look awesome. You look really good.
And you as well.
Thanks. I work on it. So what are we talking about today? I read your book. This is a great book right here. It's called Murder, Media, and Metamorphosis. I think there was a second publication in January of 26, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I read this. It's crazy because, I clerked for you back in the day. It was 1997, 1998 in Monmouth County Superior Court. And, we stayed in touch throughout the years. I kind of kept up on your career, but I had no idea of all these amazing stories and your background. I had no idea that you were the son of an immigrant from Sicily that came over, that the mob funded his trip to the United States, your father.
Yeah, he was 17 years old. Sicily was, of course, in extreme poverty, and he needed to get out of there in order to support his family. And he led a small group of guys all the way from Sicily to the border with France. However, en route, most of the guys got arrested or gave up or got hurt or whatever. He gets to the French border, and he's being chased by a border guard, and he threw his suitcase at the foot of the pursuing border guard, who fell over, and he got into France with only what he had in his pockets, which happily included his passage on a ship from Le Havre to New York and a few bucks. And he made it and started to work in New York.
What's your dad's name?
John D'Amico. I'm a junior.
Right.
He got a job in New York City in a barber shop. And, of course, he was the youngest kid in the shop, last chair. This very well-dressed man comes in to get his hair cut. My father cuts his hair, and as he's leaving, the customer gives him a $5 tip, which in 1923 was maybe a week's wage. 3 or 4 weeks later, he comes back for another haircut, another $5. The third time, my father says to him, "Why are you doing this?" And he said, "Well, I'm from the group," meaning the mafia, that funded your trip from Sicily to New York. And we would like you to join us and do some work. My father says, "Well, what kind of work do you have in mind?" And he said, "Smuggling drugs from Sicily to the U.S. My father said, "I'm not interested in that line of work." And the man said, "Do you think you have any choice?" And my father says, "Well, I don't know, but I do have a gun, so I'm ready for whatever comes." And they never bothered him after that.
There's so many parallels with that story, with the immigrants from Central and South America coming across the border in, the South.
Yes.
In terms of it's highly done by organized crime, brings them across. But the stories I've heard and from my legal career is that at least as of like 15 years ago, if you were coming from, say, Brazil, they would get you across the border, and then you would owe them $10,000, and you had, I'm sure there's a lot more now, and you would have like 3 or 4 years to pay it. And if you didn't pay it back within 3 years, your family would back in the home would be in trouble. But these stories about running across the border and all that are fascinating.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear all of that, but we have to remember that immigration was one of the major factors for the success of the American growth and economy.
Yeah.
Without people coming from all over the world, not just Southern Europe, as my father, we wouldn't have had the workforce, the innovation, and the vibrancy that immigration has brought to this country.
In your book, you talk a lot about the importance of social services programs, things like that. And it's funny because there's a dichotomy, there's a push and a pull. Sometimes, when you talk about liberal or conservative, it gets so extreme, they actually meet at the other side in some ways. So sometimes, remember stories like Ted Kennedy would team up with I don't know, Orrin Hatch, or who was the guy from the South that still believed in segregation? He was a senator for a long time. He was like 95 as a senator. He's from South Carolina. Strom Thurmond. Strom Thurmond and Kennedy would sometimes meet up on things, and same with the Supreme Court. But here's my question: Do you think there's a little bit of a survival of the fittest thing, that there's a sort of a capitalist, the strongest survive? And if so, do you think that might account for the strength of immigration and immigrants? What I mean is, so your father did a trek, a pilgrimage from southern Italy to northern Italy to the border point, and a lot of his companions got sick, gave up, lost, but the strongest survived, including your father. And not only was he strong enough and had the will, but he also had the smarts to throw his briefcase and say, I'm getting over there, and trip the border guard. Do you think there's an element to that?
Yeah, we get the best and the brightest, I think, from all over the world. And the question of wealth or poverty is irrelevant. It's a question of guts, intelligence, and drive. And that's what's made America great, because we've gotten people from all over the world with those qualities.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, too, because but anyway, keep going. Tell your story. You were...
Well, so he got here, he became a citizen, and he gradually worked his way over to New Jersey and started a business. He was a beautician or hairstylist, and he got in at the ground floor when that business was just starting to develop. And he had a business in Red Bank all the way through to the time he died in 1974, and raised a family of 5, and inspired me. I say that because when I was a kid, he used to sit down with me and say, John, you need to do good things in the world. You need to help other people. And one of the things he insisted that I do was read the book of Matthew in the Bible, the story basically of Jesus and his ministry. And that made a tremendous impression on me. Now, obviously, my father was an intelligent guy. And in fact, he used to write a little column for a newspaper in Middletown. And he had a 3-minute program on WJLK talking about your inner youth and beauty. In that sense, he was Deepak Chopra ahead of his time.
Yeah.
But he would have been a great lawyer. He had a very analytical mind. And he was basically the one who inspired me to pursue a career in law.
Do you think there's an inherent unfairness that sort of God sets in the world, where someone like your father, who, if he had first of all, you went to Harvard undergrad and Harvard Law, so I'm sure there's some genetic component to that. So if your dad had the opportunity of education, he could have been, whatever it was in life. And I've had the experience here where we know people smart as heck, but they couldn't go to college, and if they did, they would have been. So is there some sort of metaphysical or God unfairness about all that? Like why did your father, who's so smart, not get to go to, isn't there kind of an inherent unfairness about that?
Of course he had to make a living. So after he graduated 6th grade in Sicily, he started working as a barber's apprentice in Messina, which was 20 miles from his town of Montalbano. He used to walk to Messina at the beginning of the week, work all week, and then walk back to Montalbano over the weekend for a visit with his family. Let's put it this way. America is a land of opportunity. If he had been born here, he would have had the opportunity to go to college and law school. I was the first child in my family to graduate high school. My mother went to a grammar school in Brooklyn, didn't go to high school. I'm just so grateful for the opportunity that Harvard gave me to matriculate.
Now, you didn't get there on a wrestling scholarship, right?
No, I tell people I was an affirmative admit, because out of a class of 1,500, if there were a dozen Italian Americans, that was a lot. But what I did, which was a little bit outside the box, was I wrote a letter to the Dean of Admissions at Harvard requesting an interview prior to my appointment, my application. And he said, yeah, sure, come on up. So I had a nice conversation with the dean, and as I'm walking out of the interview, he goes like this to my father. Of course, my father never said anything about that, and I had to sweat out whether I was going to get in.
Wow.
And I did get a scholarship to the college, and then I was able to go to the law school. So my father, who came from Sicily, age 17, without any money, got to see 2 Harvard graduations, college and law school.
Like, where does that come from? Even having the presence of mind, the I guess I'll say fortitude to say, I'm going to reach out to the dean for a sit-down interview before I even send in my application. Was that your dad telling you to do something like that?
No, it just popped into my head as a possible strategy, that wouldn't have been tried by very many applicants. I did it at Brown, too, and got early admission.
So a tip to the listeners, request a sit-down interview.
The dean at Brown, he was great. He says, you've got a nice background, blah, blah, blah. Why don't you come to Brown? And I did not, but...
That's the type of thing, and I'm, it's no secret that I'm the youngest one besides Oscar over there in the room, but I feel like that's something that is such a more old school mentality that people don't think to have these days that they totally should, of having a sit-down meeting, just a face-to-face like we're doing here. And clearly it played a big role for you.
Absolutely. Don't be afraid.
So, and I don't want to jump in too much, but
no, go ahead.
So the 1960s, it was 1963 that you graduated from Harvard College?
College and 66 law, yeah.
There's a lot going on in America in the 60s. What was that like being at Harvard for that time period?
Well, this was just at the beginning of the Vietnam War, of course. But the main issue in my undergraduate years was the fact that Harvard University abandoned its old Latin diploma and went to an English diploma and shrank the thing to a really obnoxiously poor document. So there was a Latin diploma riot in Cambridge, Massachusetts, featuring tear gas and so forth, of which I got a whiff. And
really?
Boy, it is tough stuff. We had one of our classmates donned a toga and gave a speech in Latin on the steps of Widener Library in favor of retaining the Latin diploma. Well, what the university didn't relent on changing to English, but they did improve the format of the diploma. So we sort of had a partial victory on that one.
Wow.
But it wasn't really until after I got out of law school that the major protests occurred during the Vietnam War, including the occupation of some of the offices at Harvard and Columbia and Cornell and some of the other universities.
So when you compare that stuff to what's happening today, like, part of your book, it's a memoir, and it's also kind of advice for the future, advice for the people. You have, real concerns about our democracy and where things are going.
And the environment, too.
Yeah, and the environment. But I'm a little more optimistic for the future. and I've said this before, I've read Washington's original writings. I've read the original writings from the Civil War. There's another book that's put out by the I think it's the library. It's not the Library of Congress. They publish and keep the proliferation of the original writings. And stuff in the country was real bad back in the 1700s and 1800s. And when you compare that today, like, I think the democracy, it's sort of like, it's an aspiration. A true democracy is an aspiration. And I think you cited that in your book. One of the things was, when we're all good, there'll be no need for government anymore.
Correct.
And that's sort of like an aspiration. And if you think things are bad now, they were worse in the 1700s and the 1800s. You had pistol fights on the floor of the Congress. You had sword fights. We all know how Alexander Hamilton died. But real quick,
Not to mention the Civil War.
oh, God,
Yeah.
right, exactly. And when we talk about the recent events with protesters being killed by the government and the country, but then we talk about what happened at Kent State. I haven't seen anything like what happened at Kent State or what you're talking about happened at Harvard. So how do what do you think about that in the greater context of where we've been and where we're going?
Well, democracy is only be as good as we make it. And so the thrust of my book is that we need to participate and try to do what we can, however modest that might be, with whatever tools we have. And if it involves running for office, as I did, that's great. But there are many, many other ways that you can get together with people who are concerned about the same issue that bothers you and can do things about appearing at hearings and agitating in multiple ways. So that was basically the idea behind the book, not so much to talk about what I did, but to get across the point that what I did is a model for what you can do.
Do you think there's something to be said for an armed citizenry? Because I knew you do write in your book about the assault weapons ban and in favor of that, but is there something to be said for an armed citizenry, especially when you see what's happening domestically in Iran today?
Well, there's no problem with the Second Amendment and allowing people to have weapons and guns, but the question is, where can they use them? How can they use them? Should they be licensed in any way, and so on? When I was in the Senate and we were debating the assault weapons ban, people were saying, well, these assault rifles, et cetera, should be allowed to be used. And I said, well, I wonder why hunters would need a weapon of such potency. And in the caucus, I said, well, if we're going to go that far, maybe we should just issue flamethrowers to the hunters so that not only will they kill all of their prey, but it'll be barbecued. That didn't go over too well. But there's a right to bear arms, but we need to be mindful of the need to protect public property and public life and the lives of our citizens.
So you think a balance, some sort of a
balance. Absolutely.
Yeah. Because the people in Iran, apparently 30,000 were killed by the government in the protests in January, and if they don't have weapons, they can't do anything about that.
Right, that's right.
And you also make the point in your book that a true democracy is by virtue of the consent of the governed.
Yes, no question about that as well. It's a test of reasonableness. And, a lot of the people that talk about democracy say, well, it should be Christian and so forth and so on. And I have no problem with the idea that Christian values should govern how we behave in a democratic society. In fact, some of the founding fathers, Patrick Henry and Thomas Jefferson, believed that the country should be governed by Christian principles. But that doesn't mean that you must force everyone to be a Christian. This is a society that embodies religious toleration, and that was the key advantage of the United States Constitution as opposed to the monarchical regimes in Europe where a certain religion was mandated for everyone.
Yeah, there's such an interplay between power and religion. The governments can use the influence of religion to control the masses.
I'd like to read. This is in my book. Something that Abraham Lincoln said about the combination of democracy and Christianity. He's talking about what the founders believed about that. Wise statesmen as they were, they knew the tendency of prosperity to breed tyrants. And so they established these great self-evident truths that when in the distant future some man, some faction, some interest should set up the doctrine that none but rich men or none but white men were entitled to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, their posterity might look up again to the Declaration of Independence and take courage to renew the battle which their fathers began, so that truth, justice, mercy, and all the humane and Christian virtues might not be extinguished from the land, so that no man would hereafter dare to limit and circumscribe the great principles on which the Temple of Liberty was being built. He could have written this on a podcast, given this on a podcast today, because it's so relevant to the issues we face in this country right now.
Yeah. So to talk about that more, what do you apply that to today?
What we need
is... If you don't mind.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What we need to realize is that we are all in this together, and that we owe each other respect. And what Christian values teach us is that we have to help the most vulnerable of our society, the poor, the weak, the sick, and the needy, and the stranger. We talk about immigration as if the people that come to this country are aliens and don't belong here. That's,
illegals.
Yeah.
It's just the most Orwellian, terrible term.
Yeah, that's not the Christian view.
God, yeah.
That's not the Christian view.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure Jesus was an undocumented immigrant. Isn't that why he had to go back to Galilee or something to register for the census?
That's absolutely right.
You know,
Benjamin Franklin wrote in his autobiography that to live a useful life, you should follow Jesus and Socrates. Jesus in terms of having compassion to your fellow man and woman, and Socrates to sort of give you humility, you know, and to question everything that's going on. And that's sort of the spirit in which I've written the book and behaved.
Yeah, I think the problem with, you know, a state-sponsored religion or the government selecting a religion or once again, you know, sometimes I see some of these leaders and these politicians, you know, who live the most unchristian lives and are setting the most unchristian example, you know, using Christianity and the Bible as sort of a bait to sway votes, and
was not intended as a weapon with which to slay other people.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus' message was one of compassion.
See, I believe in Christian values. You know, I grew up Catholic, went to Catholic school my whole life, including law school. So certainly I believe in Christian values, but one person's idea of Christianity is different from another's, and then it can be really, when government gets involved in religion and promoting religion, it can really, disfigure it, and then you could have, like you have in the Middle East, where you have, you know, one person's view is Islam supports doing horrific things, and if you look at really Islam and the Islamic teachings, they're nothing compared to radical Islam, which is used to control the masses in a lot of those.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah. Well, the founders made a very wise decision to enshrine religious toleration in the Constitution.
Yeah.
And it has not only been good for the country, but also good for religion, because in America, religion has thrived, whereas in other countries with religious restrictions, that has not been the case.
Yeah. But how is it? Look, so when we look at Trump, how did he get the support of the Christian coalition? And I mean, given, you know, how does that happen? I guess a lot of them are like, well, we'll get him in there and he'll do what we want him to do. So we'll sort of like control him. And so we'll look beyond his anti-Christian statements, behavior. Like when I look at the old C-SPAN, I've said this before, I look at C-SPAN of like whether or not you agree with Ronald Reagan or you agree with, George Bush Sr., they were gentlemen. They were statesmen. They were respectful of people, even if you disagreed. But how does that work? Like how do they get all those Christian Bible Belt to vote in that for Trump, and how do they look beyond the obvious sort of anti-Christian behavior?
I can explain that with reference to my household.
Yeah.
When I when I used to run for office, I could count on my daughter's vote as a tiebreaker because my wife is a very conservative Republican, and she's a supporter of the Trump administration for two reasons. Number one, she believes that abortion should be discouraged, if not made totally illegal. And secondly, she's against gay marriage. So her thinking, and I think the thinking of a lot of the people that supported the Trump candidacies, felt, well, we can achieve these important goals, that is to say, to abolish or restrict abortion and to preserve the man and the woman as the center of the family, while basically not worrying about the other things that might be done. And so that essentially is what has happened in this country.
So to what extent should politicians, especially very influential politicians, just be a weather vane for the winds of the people? You know what I'm saying? Like if the winds are going this way, they go that way. Do you understand what I'm saying? As opposed to having their own thing. So if they're simply a weather vane for the people, like we want abortion outlawed, okay, we'll vote for the guy that may, I don't know, maybe had abortions or something or funded abortion, who knows, But so the weather vane doesn't really matter. It's just the person who's transferring what the masses want. Or is there a statesman or leadership that has to be there as well?
Well, what's interesting about the abortion issue is that there's not, I don't think, majority support for a total ban on abortion. So when you bring up the weather vane issue, if you look at the major issues confronting the country, whether economic or social, most of the issues that Americans feel strongly about, such as preserving and protecting the environment, making sure that there are reasonable controls for guns, and you can go down the line on all sorts of it, even on the issue of immigration, whether or not ICE is proceeding appropriately or not. You will find that the elected representatives in Congress are completely out of step with those polls and with the feeling of vast majorities of Americans.
And why is that the case? Is that because there's a smaller subset that is putting them up there, funding their campaigns? Like, why is that the case?
The problem is that there are some structural defects in the democracy that was created by the founders. Yeah. The electoral college being one of them.
The irony of the electoral college is that was put in place to prevent a populist sort of person with tyrannical leanings from getting in by fooling the masses. So we had these elites who would be a safety net for that.
Well, the thought behind it was that the average voter or the average American who was eligible to vote would not have enough information about the candidates for the presidency to make an informed decision and an informed vote. And so they created this electoral college so that the electors, who they presumed would have greater knowledge about the candidates, would make the right decision.
Yeah, they ultimately didn't trust the masses, the framers.
That's right. That's one issue. Another issue is the predominance of money in politics in this country.
That Citizens United opinion was terrible.
Of course, my thesis is that elections should be publicly funded, and that would resolve a lot of issues. And the other issue is the primary system in this country. And there are solutions to that issue, such as ranked choice voting and Final Five processes that could address that issue as well. There are a lot of reforms, and I discussed them in my book in the last chapter, that could make democracy more responsive to the desires and the will of the American people. Right now, there's a major disconnect, and if we don't do something about it, we're going to have a lot of trouble going ahead.
But how do you compare, when I look back, going back to the kind of thought earlier, like we haven't had anything as bad as the Kent State stuff that you experienced when you were, in college or in that time period, I think things are getting better compared to the way they were. I mean, it's almost like the stock market, like the stock market go up, down like this, but over time it generally goes up, right? Even though there's dips down. So while in the stock market of our democracy, I feel like in time since the beginning, it's generally up, although we have dips at certain points.
Yeah, Martin Luther King said that. The arc of justice is continually rising. And I think that's generally true. As difficult as things are now, there's another election coming up.
Can't get here quick enough.
Soon. And then in 2028.
I thought we were talking about doing away with that.
And 2028, provided that Congress is not allowed to distort and
the gerrymandering
emasculate
stuff.
the electoral system.
Yeah.
So, Judge, you seem like you're a bit of a student of early American history, I guess to say it short. What are your thoughts on the Constitution? Is it a living, breathing document? Did our founding fathers have the foresight to foresee what we've got going on in present day?
Absolutely. Of course, they provided in the Constitution that it could be amended. Now, the amendment process is a little difficult, and maybe that's a good thing. But what they did was give the government to the people as opposed to a monarch. And although there are some people that believe we should have a monarch of some sort, I think that the average American understands the importance of not having a king and of having choice. And the country will survive if enough people are concerned and go out and vote. Mm-hmm. I mean, the mechanism of elections and the fact that the Constitution gives the states the power over how elections are conducted has been a major bulwark against the perversion of our American democracy.
Because, Jerry, you talked about reading some of Washington's writings and things. He essentially, there were a number of people that wanted him to essentially become king, be a king. And I mean, turn that down and say, no, the system's bigger than me. And
yeah, I mean, after the British surrendered and we're all concentrated in New York on ships on the way back across the sea, and the thing's over and Washington's in command of the largest army, I don't know if it's the largest in the world at the point, but he could have done whatever he wanted with the country. And he rode his horse. He's exhausted, hadn't seen Martha in probably several years. And he rides his horse. I think it was from New York to Philly or Boston to Philly to surrender, to give in his commission back to Congress of the general. Yeah. Could you imagine our current president? Would he, you think, I mean, would he hey, here it is. or I mean, the statesmanship of Washington and the foresight to not grab the power.
Well, resignation is a significant power that the current president has, but he doesn't appear ready to exercise it.
How is he getting out of Iran? What I feel like I'm having deja vu. Like, remember the WMD, the Iraq II, where we were going in for weapons of mass destruction?
I didn't find anything.
Are we? It was like imminent. I thought he took out the nuclear weapons. What was it? A year ago or 6 years ago
over the
or
summer.
6 months ago?
Yeah.
He took out the nukes, and the program's done. And then suddenly they're a couple days away from a nuclear weapon. And then you have Tulsi Gabbard up there talking about the nuclear weapons, which brings, what does that remind you of? Colin Powell showing the little picture of the thingy with the chemical weapons. It was a total farce.
Yeah.
Are we, and like it's easy to start wars, but it's real hard to stop them.
Well, there's a major difference between the war in Iraq and the war we're in now. Before we invaded Iraq, we built a coalition of other countries.
You're talking Iraq One.
Iraq One.
Yeah, that's different.
We developed a coalition of other countries to support us and to work with us. And we also had a majority of Americans approving of the war in Iraq, the first war.
Yeah.
None of those factors are present now, and that's a major failure, in my opinion. That all said, this regime in Iran, of course, is so dangerous and so miserable and nasty and dangerous that something had to be done.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of glad that the Israelis did finally go in there and do something. And I think we do have to finish what we've started in some way.
That's sorry, Judge, to cut you off.
That's all right.
That's where it becomes so difficult, though, because what is it that we're finishing that we have to get in and make sure their nuclear program is obliterated, like Jerry said, which we thought it was obliterated 6 months ago? Is it to topple that entire regime and get the regime in place that we want? Because it seems like it becomes one of those wars where you're fighting, ideologies. It's not like it's a land battle where we want to capture the country of Iran. So how do you fly the mission accomplished banner?
It might be unwinnable in the same way that the war in Vietnam was not, but at least if we degrade their ability to manufacture and use missiles and drones and do other horrible things to their neighbors, that'll be something to be happy about. But the problem is we don't have a real plan on how to execute all of the things that need to be done. For example, clearing the Strait of Hormuz.
Mm-hmm.
I read the other day that Iran has these underwater submarines and other weapons that they can use to attack U.S. warships if they were to escort ships through the strait. So it's a very, very difficult problem for which apparently there was not a lot of anticipatory analysis and planning.
Yeah, I mean, from what I'm reading and seeing, it doesn't take much to disrupt the traffic through the Straits of Hormuz. You can do it with a little boat, a little floating mine, a little underwater mine. You can do it from those crazy drones they have can be shot from the other side of the country, make their way there, and you only need to disrupt one or two before the boats are like, we're not going through, and they won't insure them, and they can't take the risk, and so it's a big problem.
One solution, partial solution that I can see is for the construction of pipelines that bypass the strait. There are some, but they have limited capacity. I could see a major public works project expanding that capacity for the small countries that Iran is now bombing.
Yeah.
I'm picturing like a Mission Impossible situation too, where you hear like the uranium is 30 stories underground somewhere and things like what, I don't know. There's obviously things going on behind the scenes that we can't even fathom, but.
Right.
So I was reading your book and you're like, how long is this podcast going to be? And I'm like, I don't know, Judge, it can go anywhere from an hour, sometimes 3 hours. Yeah. But when I was reading your book, I was like, geez, we could do a whole series of podcasts on this, but you want to get back to some of your. I know we're meandering off into current events, which is fine, but let's talk about your career. You've had a fascinating career. So you're at Harvard. So take it from there.
Well, after my graduation from law school in 1966, I got a clerkship at the Monmouth County Court. It was before the Superior Court existed. And during my clerkship year, I worked for Judge Tom Smith. He was assigned to criminal, and he had a murder trial, his first murder trial. And so we worked together. I used to work on weekends and so forth, helping him with the jury charge and so on and so forth. And he completed the trial. As sort of an amusing episode at the end of the trial, the attorney for the defendant, Joe Mattice, who was then the mayor of Asbury Park, used to, in his summation, have
rosary beads.
Yeah, rosary beads in his pockets. So he would pull out his handkerchief, and the rosary beads would fall on the floor in front of the jury.
That's to ingratiate them. So I didn't fully understand, but that's like, oh, he must be a religious person.
Yeah, and so he's more credible in his summation.
Got it.
It didn't work. His client got convicted, and so I helped Judge Smith prepare the charge, and he read the charge to the jury, and at the end he thanked me. They said, I want to thank my law clerk, John D'Amico, for helping me with the charge. We wanted to make sure that it was absolutely correct in case of an appeal. At that point, I put my head in my hands, and Joe Mattice jumped up and said, I demand a mistrial, suggesting to the jury that it should convict. And, of course, the judge denied the motion. Fortunately, no appeal was ever filed, and that was the end of that episode.
But see, you got to have more of a poker face, because do you think maybe young lawyer John D'Amico putting his head signaled to the defense lawyer maybe he should jump up and object?
No, actually,
you know what I'm saying?
I jumped up as Joe Mattice was jumping up.
Okay, got it.
All right. Well, so anyway, this is all by way of prelude to the State versus Carl Coppolino trial, which also occurred during my clerkship year. And Dr. Coppolino was represented by F. Lee Bailey.
Oh, wow.
And so he came to Freehold and tried the case, and I was able to watch portions of it. And Judge Simmel, the assignment judge who tried the case, actually borrowed the charge that I had helped Judge Smith prepare and used it in the Coppolino case. The Coppolino trial in Freehold demonstrated F. Lee Bailey's mastery of showmanship. And it also revealed that he had a photographic memory and had a tremendous amount of preparation. For example, during jury selection, he would walk up to a juror and say, how's the laundry business these days? And how are your 3 children? And so forth and so on. He knew intimate details about every potential juror in the panel.
This, in your book's an amazing picture of F. Lee Bailey here as a young lawyer.
Can I see that, Jay?
Yeah, right here.
Wow.
I read this book last night. It's a page turner. I was a little bit late this morning getting here, but the reason I was late, and I apologize to you for that, is because I was up reading this, and then I finished it this morning.
Terrific.
So I asked you, is it better to be late and prepared, or on time and unprepared?
Better to be prepared
and a little late.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a great picture of him in there.
So anyway, so there was that. I also watched the bail hearing because in order to hold Coppolino in jail, the state had to show that there was probable cause for his conviction. And so the state put the medical examiner on the stand, and Bailey got all kinds of free discovery by way of cross-examination for that. And of course, his cross-examination of Marjorie Farber, who was the state's principal witness, was so beautifully done. And the episodes about her being under hypnosis and so on are legendary in legal circles. So he was a great showman in the Freehold trial. In the Florida trial, which didn't turn out as well for his client, he was acquitted. Coppolino was acquitted in Freehold, but convicted in Naples, Florida.
That was a whole love triangle thing.
Yeah.
It's the story of the trial is fascinating in this book. It's a crazy love triangle story. I recommend it to people. By the way, I'm not selling this book or anything. I'm just telling you. I was up late nights reading it.
It's available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Yeah.
Can I get the cliff notes of what the triangle was? Because I got Jerry's 2:45 a.m. email about the book, but I didn't purchase it.
They got the book. I'm telling you, it's fascinating.
What I was going to say about the Florida trial, it showed another side of F. Lee Bailey, which is that he was a brilliant legal analyst and tactician. And he made an argument regarding expert witnesses against his client that anticipated the Daubert case many, many years later. And I write about that in the book as well. A fascinating episode. And, of course, for a young law clerk, to experience seeing F. Lee Bailey in action was incredible.
Was he the name back then? Was he well known even back then?
He had just completed the Dr. Sam Shepard trial.
Yes.
And had gained national notoriety as a result of his getting the doctor off.
Yeah.
I'm like writing down the characteristics you're listing off, and I'm like, okay, I guess that's the to be a good trial lawyer, you got showmanship, preparation, good memory, and legal analysis, and being a technician.
All of that. And Jerry's done pretty well with some of those skills.
So is Mark.
Mark as well.
Well, thank you. I guess maybe you helped out there. That helped me out. So.
Well, you have to know that when he came to my courthouse, he was a right-wing Republican, and he left his clerkship as a fire-breathing plaintiff's attorney. So,
well, I had just come off an internship with Bob Dole in the U.S. Senate a couple of years, but
a great man, by the way.
Yeah, he was another statesman.
Yeah, absolutely. We need more Republicans of his stature, and Democrats as well.
Yeah, I remember. Anyway, I don't. It's not about me; it's about you. But I kind of became a lawyer because I wanted to get rid of all these frivolous lawsuits, And I said, my first opportunity to do so will be as I'm making recommendations to a superior court judge.
Nothing wrong with frivolity. Once in a while, you turn up some real issues and get some great results, as you have done.
What I found, though, is in my legal career, I have encountered far more frivolous defenses and far more frivolous arguments made by, defense medical experts, hired by the insurance company to say people are faking it. You know what we've been doing, Judge Demille? Because I remember when we would do those motions back in the day about summary judgment for medical and the tort threshold, and I started this about 15 years ago, is we send a nurse to pretty much every defense medical examination. And when we did it in the beginning, they didn't know what to think of it. So like if a doctor's doing 20 defense medical exams in a day, if one or two have a nurse, they'll just whatever. But they don't think much of it. And what we found is we would then have the nurse provide us a report, and I was finding the doctor's the one faking the exam. So they'd be at the exam and they say, the plaintiff jumped up off the exam table, looked all the way up to the ceiling and to the ground with no pain, no problems, and then was able to twist and bend. And the nurse is like, yeah, that never happened. Yeah. And then we started recording him, and then I started doing trials where, and the doctor, they do 20 a day. The trials maybe 3 years later, they have no idea. They forget.
No recollection. Yeah.
And then you hit them with the video of they just would go red-faced, like catching him, and like far more frivolous defenses than plaintiffs.
Well, that was a good strategy. Congratulations.
Yeah, I don't know. It works.
Yeah.
It's just the truth, shedding light on things.
Yeah. One of the things that I did, and I don't remember if it was your year or the year after, was I developed the consent order for expedited jury trial.
Yeah.
Which has been used in cases that are not high value necessarily, and people didn't want to pay the experts to come in because they were probably charging more than the case was worth. And what that did was allow the parties to use expert reports and other materials and give that information directly to the jury, and it allowed attorneys to present their case in the most precise, logical, and persuasive manner. So that mechanism has been useful in a lot of cases, not only in New Jersey, but it's been followed in other states. I'm just writing an article now that will be published soon by the New Jersey Law Journal, suggesting that we should take advantage of the shortcuts in the expedited jury trial consent order, but eliminate some of the restrictions so that a similar approach can be taken in any civil case, regardless of its gravity.
Yeah.
That must have been Jerry's ear, because he's recommended that to me quite a few times on certain cases to request an expedited trial.
Yeah. Yeah, the problem with it is, you're limited to 3 peremptory challenges, 15-minute openings, 30-minute summations. You have to use model jury charges only. This new proposed consent order for streamlined civil trial would eliminate those restrictions, but still allow you to use reports and documents obtained in discovery in lieu of live testimony, which in many instances will speed up a trial and also give the jury the information that they need to make a more reasoned and accurate judgment.
It's probably more fitting today, too, because pretty much we have an ADD epidemic going on in the country where people's attention spans are quite short, Yeah.
Yeah, well, the jurors that we interviewed after conducting expedited jury trials said that they loved the process. First of all, of course, the trials were only a day, day and a half, 2 days max. But also they loved having the documents in front of them instead of having to try to remember everything that was said on the witness stand. So I'm going to press that proposal and see where we go with it.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. And I recall back when I was clerking that there was a lot of good feedback from a lot of the lawyers on both sides, defense and plaintiff's lawyers.
Yeah.
And you came up with that idea at 3 a.m. one morning or something? You were thinking about
Middle of the night.
Yeah.
And the message from God or whoever was read the rules of procedure and evidence and look for all of the shortcuts.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did.
Well, it's in line with rule number 1, which is the rules should be interpreted for simplicity, fairness, and unjustifiable delay.
Yeah.
Exactly, and that's provision number 1, not only in the consent order for expedited jury trial, but the new one, the consent order for streamlined civil trials.
All right, so you graduate, you're clerking. What do you do after the clerkship?
Well, after the clerkship, I worked for the firm of Drazen, Warshaw, and Auerbach.
It's so funny. I always saw you over the years as kind of a straight-laced guy, Harvard kid, but I didn't realize what a troublemaker you were until I read your book. I thought that, do you think so when you were the head of the parole board, what was the chairman of the parole board or the?
Yeah. Well, let's back up though. Let's back up a little bit.
We will, but I have a question though.
Okay.
I have a question. So when you were in the parole board,
yes,
and the attorney general in charge of the parole board came to your place and said, look, John, you can't be using Jesus and God so much in these speeches trying to keep people out of jail, reformers.
Yeah.
And when you said to the attorney general, and you said, thank you very much, I'll do it when you hand me an injunction from a judge.
That's right, yeah.
Were there any, that harkens back to when your dad told the mob guy in the thing, thank you very much. Keep in mind, I have a gun.
Well, the context of that was I sensed that we needed to get more help for parolees from local charities and ministers and priests and religious organizations, charitable organizations. So we conducted a series of community partnership conferences in all of the major cities in New Jersey. And in my presentation, I invoked Matthew 25, that we should clothe the naked, feed the hungry, heal the sick, and visit prisoners in prison.
Yeah.
And other biblical quotations intended to motivate the faith-based community, especially, that was in attendance, and that we fed for free,
Yeah.
to join in an effort to make lives better for parolees. And so the Deputy Attorney General was essentially objecting to the religious content of those speeches at those conferences, and that's why I said, well, as soon as you can give me an injunction from a federal or state judge, I'll stop.
Did you ever get that injunction?
No, none was ever forthcoming. And what happened was that these charitable organizations like the Salvation Army, Catholic Charities, and also local ministers and priests and imams did join in task forces to provide things that parolees needed when they came out: housing, driver's licenses, food, clothing, all the necessities to make it on the outside after coming out of prison. And we did a calculation a year or two after the conferences, and we figured that the state was getting millions and millions of dollars worth of assistance from these task forces to help these prisoners. And the recidivism rate for New Jersey started to really precipitously decline, and was like 60% or more when I began at the parole board, and it's now less than 30%.
Yeah, because it's a lot cheaper to manage a convict outside of prison through a parole system than it is to house them in the jails.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and the longer they stay in the jail, the more likely it is when they get out that they're gonna continue a crime.
Yeah, that's right.
And how does we'll go back to when you caused trouble on the New Jersey train system and all that stuff.
Okay.
We'll get back to that part of your career.
Okay.
That's what I meant about trouble.
I got to read the book.
But before we do that, I have a question. Given your experience heading the parole board and recidivism and how does privatized prisons factor into all that, where you're incentivizing a private company to keep people in jail because they make more money with that?
Their history has not been good. They don't provide adequate services in terms of maintaining the prisoner's health. They don't have the programs that the New Jersey prison system and other progressive prison systems in the country provide in terms of substance abuse counseling and job readiness and GED achievement. And so I go with public prisons that have a commitment to prepare prisoners for reentry into society, as opposed to private prisons whose primary reason of being is to make money.
Yeah, and we had former Governor McGreevey on the show, and you talk about him in the book too with the program that he's started.
Yeah, he appointed me to the parole board at a time when it was racked with scandal. The parole board had paroled a mobster named Prisco, and the allegation was that one of the attorneys that supported McGreevey had contacted the parole board and arranged the early release and so forth. So anyway, I came in at his request, and he was exonerated from any involvement in that case. But my charge from him was to reform the parole system, which we did. I mean, one of the other issues was reincarcerating parolees for technical violations. For example, a parolee misses an appointment with a parole officer because he or she had to go to work, and rather than losing the job, skipped the session with the parole officer. That should not be a basis for a return to prison because of revocation of parole. Yeah. Another example, someone that has a relapse of a substance abuse problem, the appropriate response to that is to use one of the substance abuse programs that we have in place to try to counsel and improve that person's behavior, as opposed to putting him back in jail, which does nothing for anybody.
Yeah.
So those were some of the additional reforms that we did.
All right, so let's go back to when you graduated
law school. I worked for Drazen in Warsaw
Yeah.
for a couple of years. I didn't particularly enjoy trial work, although I did okay with it. And I also did some criminal defense, public defender work. On one case where I was assigned to defend a prisoner for breaking an entry. And customarily, when you had such an assignment, they would bring the prisoner to Monmouth County so that you could interview them. So I made that request. I said, we can't bring him to Monmouth County. I said, oh, no, why not? Well, you'll find out. Where is he? He's in the Middlesex County Jail. I said, all right, I'll go visit him there. So I visited this fellow, and I said, they won't let you come to Monmouth County for an interview. Why? What are you in here for? He says, well, I'm in here for murder. Oh. I said, well, who's your attorney? He says, yeah, well, I have an assigned attorney. I have his card. He gives me the card. It's a patent lawyer at Johnson & Johnson.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
So after my interview with him, I go to the law department at Johnson & Johnson. The fellow happened to be there, and I said, I've got this B&E trial, but I think you probably should resolve the murder case first. And he agreed. Wow. So that was sort of a bizarre episode of that. But anyway, I decided to take a corporate job as a corporate attorney for the Mutual Benefit Life Insurance Company. And therefore, I commuted by train from Little Silver, where we lived, to Newark. And at that time, in the early 70s, train service was just horrendous. It was being operated by Conrail under contract with the state of New Jersey. The prior railroads, Pennsylvania Railroad and Jersey Central, had gone bankrupt. And Conrail was basically a freight operator, and they were just doing a terrible job of running passenger service.
The cattle got treated better.
Yeah. The trains were late all the time. They were
like the cattle couldn't be transported. They needed air conditioning and heat or something. But
I'll tell you about that. I'll tell you about it. So anyway,
sorry, I didn't mean to prepare so much for this.
That's okay. That's okay. So
you taught me to be prepared when I was clerking for you, so it's your fault.
Okay. So we were, late to work half the time, and the conditions were just deplorable. On one occasion, the train coming down from in the evening skipped the Middletown stop, which was the biggest stop on the line. And when the train stopped in Red Bank, the Middletown commuters got on the tracks to block the locomotive from going any further until they were provided bus transportation back to Middletown, which did occur.
Wow. No Uber back then.
Yeah. So after that incident, we got together, a group of us in Little Silver primarily, and formed the Irate Shore Commuters. I came up with that name as reflective of how angry we were. And we invited a reporter from the Daily Register, Mark Magyar, who's still around, did a lot of work in Trenton, to advise us how should we deal with these issues. And he said, well, you have to basically be like three-piece suit radicals. You have to do crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we said, okay, we'll see what we can do. So our next step was that we would pay for our tickets, our monthly tickets, by check. However, the group who participated in this stopped payment on the checks and instead gave me the money to hold in my attorney trust account. And I wrote a letter to the chairman and CEO of Conrail saying, because the service you're providing is so terrible, members of the Irate Shore commuters have given me their checks, and I'm holding them in my attorney deposit trust account until you improve rail service. So that got things started. And what happened was that the state had a very poor agency called a commuter operating agency working with Conrail, and they decided to propose a fare increase on top of all of the misery that we were experiencing.
And that's the day you had to wear suits to work, right? You're in a wool suit commuting.
Absolutely.
Someone's got
yeah,
an egg salad
yeah,
sandwich next to you.
Yeah, no air conditioning, no heat in the winter, really horrible. So I said, well, we've got to challenge the fare increase, which you do by going to the appellate division to challenge an action of a state agency.
It goes direct to the active.
So I needed the money to prepare the briefs and so forth and so on. So each of us got on a different train in the morning, and went to each car and asked each commuter to donate $1 toward the lawsuit. And so we raised about $2,500, which was enough to cover at that time the appellate division filing. So I filed the claim, the challenge, and so we get before a 3-judge panel. And my argument, which was developed with the help of an accountant who lived behind me in Little Silver, who looked at the statute and the materials that they provided, and he said, well, they don't comply with the statute because they can only justify a fare increase for results shown in prior years. And they were basing the fare increase on what they needed for the coming year. So I made that argument, and the appellate division said, thank you, and stopped me right there. And the rest of the argument was them going after the Deputy Attorney General about why they haven't complied with the statute. Make a long story short, the court sustained our objection and deferred the fare increase for a while. That was a Pyrrhic victory, but the big victory was during the course of that hearing, it was revealed that the Conrail contract of millions of dollars over a 3 or 4 year period had never been audited. And when we, during the appellate division argument, newspaper reporters and TV reporters from New York were trying to get into the courtroom to film, and then the presiding appellate division judge says, "Get out of here, you're not allowed in here." But when I got outside, I got interviewed, and we raised the real issue, which was how horribly the contract with Conrail had been managed.
Yeah.
All right. So, long story short, the key people involved in managing the contract resigned. The Commissioner of Transportation resigned. Governor Byrne had to appoint a new Commissioner of Transportation and give him the mandate to clear up this mess. And so he appointed Lou Gambasini, and we decided we needed to work with Lou in order to get the problem solved. And so he invited us to participate with him. And what we had to do was we had to change the Federal Railway Act in order to allow states to take over passenger service. So I went to Washington with Martin Robbins, who was the brains of New Jersey Department of Transportation, and we met with Bill Bradley, we met with Congressman Howard, who was head of Public Works, and a bunch of other people, and argued that there needed to be a reform of the law. And that did eventually happen. But as part of that process, I was invited to testify in Congress before Jim Florio, who was head of the subcommittee that had jurisdiction. And it was during that testimony that I pointed out that the U.S. Department of Agriculture regulations require, regarding the transportation of cattle, that there be ventilation and that it not be too hot or too cold. And I said the North Jersey coastline would have been illegal if subject to the agricultural department rules.
Yeah.
And that was written up in an editorial in the Star Ledger and also got a lot of attention.
Yeah. The
long story short, that all basically led to the formation of New Jersey Transit. And, of course, we then participated in the structuring of New Jersey Transit. I argued that there should be public control of the board, and the legislature essentially agreed with that. And that moved us forward a great deal. The state then acquired the rail lines and property from Conrail, but there was still a problem here in the coast because in 1968, the voters had approved a referendum, a statewide referendum, funding electrification of the North Jersey coastline from South Amboy all the way down to Bayhead. The money was never used. It was diverted to other line items. And so I did some research, and I found a bill that had been passed in the Senate a couple of years after that, that said that if funding becomes available, the line should be electrified all the way down. So what commission...
As opposed to what, coal or something? Like, what did why was the electrifying the line
let me
better?
explain the problem. Because the trains that went into New York under the tunnels had to be electrified and could not use diesel fuel or coal for propulsion. There had to be an engine change at South Amboy. If you were got on a train from Little Silver, for example, and wanted to go all the way into New York, you had to wait in South Amboy while the engine, the diesel engine, was removed and an electric engine was attached and then all the way in.
Right.
So I said, we can do better than this in America.
Yeah.
So I did some research, and I found that Senate bill. And so I wrote a memorandum to Commissioner Gambasini saying that since you now are developing the funding from the Port Authority and Congress, et cetera, for improvement of the railroads in New Jersey, you need to electrify the line. And if you do not do so, that will be misconduct and in office, dereliction of official duties, and you will be criminally liable. And so that got their attention, and we eventually worked out electrification of the coastline all the way down to Long Branch. So that's sort of a description of the agitation that we did successfully back in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah. Did you have long hair back then?
I never did, but my brother did.
So were you making, like, was the job at Mutual Benefit Life, were you making a lot of money? Was that a big paying job?
It was, I'd say, middling. It was enjoyable. I represented the company throughout the country with respect to litigation and also compliance with laws and regulations, because the life insurance business is regulated by the states and not the federal government.
So what makes you do all this? I mean, you got dual Harvard degrees. You could have gone to some big law firm in the city and made a ton of money right away. You probably would have worked double shifts. But why do you? And then I'm sure you didn't get paid for any of this public service work that you did with the commuters.
Well, first of all, I enjoyed the public service, and secondly, I never had as my objective to make a lot of money. I did have some offers from Newark firms, but I really didn't want to have the lifestyle that would entail being out at night and driving all over and so forth and doing the heavy work that you need to succeed, as you have done. So I had a lot of friends there. It was a very pleasant job. However, unfortunately, the company ran into trouble and went under, actually, as a result of overinvestment in real estate in the 90s. And so I had to scramble and do something else. Fortunately, during that entire period, I had gotten a good local reputation and name recognition because of my agitation regarding the railroad. And so I ran successfully for council in Oceanport, and then I was invited in 1983 to run for the Monmouth County Board of Freeholders, now called the Monmouth County Board of County Commissioners. And I was elected to that office and then reelected in 1996, along with John Villapiano, local fame. And then what happened was that Congressman Jim Howard died of a heart attack on a golf course while in office. And so
I suppose that's better than dying at your desk.
I definitely agree with that.
You know,
But some people say I'm such a terrible golfer that I should die at a desk instead, but that's a different matter. But anyway, so there was a special election for Howard's congressional seat, which was won by Frank Pallone. I had been invited before Frank to run for Congress by his widow and his very best friend, but my circumstances were such that I couldn't do it. So Frank Pallone gets elected. What happened at the same time was that the voters changed the manner in which legislative vacancies would be filled. Instead of special elections, the new provision under the constitutional amendment of the state constitution was that the district committee that controlled the state, that controlled the seat in the assembly or the Senate, would appoint in by majority vote a substitute to serve in that seat until the next general election. So Congressman Howard dies, Congressman Pallone is elected, and he vacates his seat in the New Jersey Senate. I was at that time a freeholder or county commissioner for the whole county, but including the 11th district, which Pallone represented in the Senate. So I got the majority of vote to take Pallone's seat in the state Senate in 1988, and I served there until 1989 when Senator Joe Pallea knocked me out by a very, very narrow margin. I say all of this by way of background alongside the fact that mutual benefit life was failing and I needed a job. So I took the severance package from Mutual Benefit Life. For a little less than a year, I was of counsel at the firm of Shea and Gould in New York City because they needed someone with insurance expertise, and that was okay. However, that firm was also falling apart.
Yeah, partners were fighting or something.
Yes. So I contacted Governor Florio, and actually I trapped him in a train during an inaugural trip of some sort. And I said, Governor, I need a job. How about a judgeship? He says, no problem. Go ahead. And so he appointed me to the judgeship in 1992. And so that's sort of a capsule of my career.
That's cool. Let's take a quick break.
Yep.
It's a good spot.
Yeah, the videotape courtroom.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I have my swearing in. You swore me in as an attorney, and I have it on video.
Yeah. Well,
Oh, really? VHS?
Yes.
I was the wedding judge, too. So
Yes.
anyone that was willing to get married at the courthouse would come to my courtroom, and we would do it. And then they could buy a videotape of their wedding for $10 from the clerk.
That's funny. I got, just real quick, I got sworn in. I worked for the prosecutor's office in Monmouth County my first year out of law school.
Yeah.
And at the time, the prosecutor was deployed in, I think it was Iraq or Afghanistan. And so we waited for him to come back to swear us in. Mm-hmm. So I passed the bar in 2014, graduated from law school in 2014, but my bar ID number is 2015 because he came back in like January, February and swore us in.
Vermicione,
yep.
Yeah.
So I always have this little bit of complex where I'm like, well, I passed the bar the first time in 2014, but my ID is just 2015 because of this, that.
I flunk the bar exam.
Yeah, not that I know a lot of very smart people that have and had to take it a few times.
Like
but
Judge Lawson 5 times.
I give those people so much credit because I was like, look, I'm doing this once. I'm treating this like a job. And if I have to do it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Amazing.
yeah.
Amazing.
So where were we? You're on the bench, 92. How long were you on the bench for, Judge?
10 years, yeah.
Nice. And along the way, you get this young whippersnapper who's
He was
trying to change the world.
One of the best.
Wow.
So you started out in the family. Yeah, we're on.
Okay.
We're on. So you started out in the family.
Yeah, that was very, very difficult. Coming from corporate law, to becoming a family court judge charged with deciding custody and visitation, divorce, domestic violence, termination of parental rights, child abuse and neglect. That was a very, very difficult transition.
Yeah.
But
were you very religious back then?
Not especially,
No,
but
okay.
My wife had been in a Bible study called the BSF, Bible Study Fellowship, and a men's group got started, and that's where I met your father, Bill.
Got it.
And where we had the conversation leading to your clerkship. But so I decided to join the men's group, and it's a very intensive, almost seminar-like study of particular sections of the Bible each year. And you learn an awful lot. The Bible, it turned out, and I discovered, had a lot of sage advice for family court judges. Of course, patience being one of the most important requirements.
Yeah.
And I was able to get through it and actually was able to write a couple of articles to help practitioners of family law. One of them had to do with bankruptcy and divorce, and another had to do with calculating child support and alimony. And the inspiration for that particular article came from a pro se who appeared before me, who was alleging that his former wife should be able to work and make so much money because statistically her profession, she was a nurse, I think, would garner a wage of such and such, and he had the labor statistics. And also her alimony should be reduced because the Bureau of Labor Statistics publishes national data about how much money average families spend on housing and food and clothing and so forth and so on. And I didn't rule in favor of this particular pro se litigant, but I said, gee, that's a terrific idea to look at these statistics, and that's what I did. I based an article on statistics from federal sources and state sources.
And you saw like divorce rates are high and stuff. And
yeah,
do they? Is it a I don't do any divorce law or divorce cases. And I always heard never handle a family member's divorce. Because it's so.
Yeah.
But
sage advice.
Is it a thing? Did you see a thing in there where they would use the children as pawns or something, and how that can be avoided, and the toll it takes on kids?
Yes. If children were a certain age, and I forget whether it's 7, 8, or maybe a little older than that, we were asked to interview the children. And so a kid would come into my chambers, without the parents, of course, and I would ask a few questions, and a kid would say something like, well, my mommy told me to tell you that my dad is awful and that he doesn't do what he says he's supposed to do. And so, so the value of those interviews could be limited in some instances. In other instances, they could be extremely helpful. I remember when I was chairman of the parole board and having been out of the family division maybe 10 or 15 years, my secretary got a call, and she said, Judge, there's a gentleman on the phone that wants to talk to you. You had a case when you were in the family division. And I said, see if you can find out if it's good news or bad news.
Yeah.
So she came back. She says, I think you'll want to talk to him. So she put him on the phone. He had divorced his wife, and his wife had some terrible issues, substance abuse primarily. However, she had custody of the daughter, who was a teenager. And he wanted custody of the child. And after a full-blown hearing, I ultimately decided in his favor and switched custody because the mother was really not nurturing this child. And he was calling me this 10 or 15 years later to tell me that the girl had just graduated nursing school and to thank me for what I had done in that case. So if I have done a few of those things, I'm grateful for God for the opportunity to help people.
Yeah, that's got to be a tough transition.
Oh, it was horrendous. I was in for 3.5 years, and then I escaped to the civil division.
Yeah, your book has a lot of good pointers for people too. If you're going through a divorce or how you can protect the kids from it. That was very impactful. And
there are a lot of resources available, and religion should not be minimized as a potential help for some people that are experiencing particularly the traumatic results.
How come you were never in the criminal division?
I ran out of time.
Oh, okay, got it. So
I made up for that by heading the parole board.
Yeah, right. So then you're in the civil division.
And of course you were one of my very best law clerks.
Thank you.
And that was obviously much easier lift, and it was enjoyable. And it was during the course of handling trials that I developed this expedited jury trial process with a consent order to save time and money and help parties with cases that aren't so valuable to avoid having to pay experts to appear in court at $4,000 or $5,000 a clip.
Yeah.
And so I developed that while I was in the civil division, and the state did incorporate that in its CDR manual, and other states actually followed the same idea.
Yeah, that's great. It's funny the things you learn as a as a young person and a young lawyer. Like just the other day, we had a case. We got a call where someone's house blew up, and the people that called us were the people next door. Now they're displaced, and the kids are traumatized. And we're like, wait, can you bring an emotional distress claim if the person hasn't themselves actually been injured? And I remember one of the cases I worked on with you was called Hahn versus New Jersey Natural Gas. And one of the opinions we wrote together is whether or not someone who sees their house burned down but is not physically injured can bring an emotional distress claim for that.
Yeah.
And so you hearken back to these cases, and then, I see that case Callahan versus Stanley Works. We use that a lot, which is a case and opinion that you wrote dealing with spoliation of evidence.
That's hairy. That's nice to hear.
Yeah. No, it was great training, and you provided great training. I mean, you weren't terribly easy to work for because you were demanding and required. I remember one of the other law clerks, she was gone at 4:31. Out of there, and then her write-ups were like a half a paragraph, and my write-ups were like pages and pages. And as a young lawyer, like, geez, why do I have to do this work? But I learned the value of hard work, and it certainly has paid off, to have a quality product and to put the time in, because being a lawyer is a sweat game. There's no way around it. To be a litigator and successful, it takes hard work and time.
And it's important to be a master of detail in the practice of law.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I learned that early on. Believe it or not, in the corporate setting, I had a director of the law department who insisted on precision in analysis and wording and an expression. He used to mark up our memos with red ink, if they were inaccurate.
Yeah.
And so I learned a valuable lesson there.
I mean, you've had such a fulfilling career in life. You've done so much stuff. So then, after the clerk, after being a Superior Court judge, you talked about you went to the parole board, but then you became a Monmouth County Commissioner after that again?
Yeah, in 2007, I had retired from the parole board, and a good friend of mine, Mike Dowling, I don't know if you know that name.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, had been appointed as executive director of the parole board, and he was running the parole board after that scandal that I mentioned with the paroling of Angelo Prisco, the mobster. And I was working with the Lemuro law firm for a year doing arbitrations and mediations. However, I got a call from Kathy Ellis, who had been Governor McGreevy's head of communications, and her husband, the mayor of Belmar, Pringle. And she said that the governor is looking for someone to reform the parole board and clear up this scandal. And I said, well, gee, I don't know if I really want to go back to work full time.
Yeah.
And of course, I ended up doing that job, and we talked about that.
Yeah.
But in 2007, before that, I was recommended by Mike Dowling to run for what was called then the Monmouth County Board of Freeholders, and now it's the County Commissioners. And I said, all right, I'll give it a shot. Yeah. And what I did, which was a little bit different from prior campaigns, especially by Democrats, was I looked at the voting numbers in Republican towns, particularly small ones like Deal, Spring Lake, Allenhurst, etc. And then I looked at the taxes that the county was collecting from those towns and discovered that there had been huge tax increases, especially for those towns, because they tended to be a little bit wealthier. So I created a tax flyer criticizing the people I was running against for hiking the county taxes in those towns. And I walked the streets and distributed these flyers. It was not only the towns I just mentioned, but also Englishtown, Interlaken, and so forth. But I mean, long story short, I was able to reduce the Republican vote in those towns by 20%, which was my margin of victory in the race. There were 13 candidates running for office in 2007 for state senate, assembly, and then the county offices, including the freeholders. I was the only Democrat among the 13 to win that year. Everyone else was defeated. So here I am back in freehold. There had been a Democrat elected the prior year. That was Barbara McMorrow. And then in 2008, when Obama ran against
McCain.
Was it McCain?
Romney the first time, McCain the second time, or McCain first time,
McCain.
Romney. McCain
yeah, when he ran
time.
against McCain. He won very nicely, even in Monmouth County, and Amy Mallett was elected to the Board of County Commissioners as the third Democrat, giving us control in the worst possible year in which you could be in government, 2009. The entire economy had collapsed.
Yeah.
And we were confronted with having to reduce the county budget in order to stay in compliance with the law.
Yeah.
And it was a very, very contentious year, horrendous, in fact. And we got through it, but we lost our majority the following year. And I was caused to exit from the board in 2010 by the Tea Party.
Okay.
Oh, God, I forgot about those days.
And then after that,
The Tea Party's like kittens compared to the current, the current version of that.
Yeah.
But so I grew up in Monmouth County, and I always loved the parks. I go biking. Mark's big mountain biker as well. Lair Park and Hartshorn Woods, and I love the rivers, the Navesink and the Shrewsbury. Grew up surfing in the Jersey Shore, and nothing gets me worse upset than overdevelopment. And they'll take like a natural resource and mow it down to put buildings and then name it after that natural resource that they just destroyed, like Apple Ridge or Walnut Grove or so. I don't know. And so the overdevelopment and then pollution, and you've done a lot with environment in our county and state.
Yes, the environment was probably my major issue of concern. back in the 80s even, when I was on the Board of County Commissioners for the first time, in the 80s, there was a tremendous pressure for development in Monmouth County, including a proposal to build housing serviced with septic tanks on the northern border of the Swimming River Reservoir in Homedale, on the Marlou Twitchell farms. I was a member of the planning board, Monmouth County Planning Board at the time, and when this proposal came before the planning board, because it was on a county road, I started to raise some questions. I says, isn't this environmentally dangerous, this proposal? And so I asked the planning board to do a study of not only the Swimming River watershed, but also the Manasquan River watershed, and to assess whether development should be controlled in those areas. And they did issue a report and said, well, this proposal in Homedale would be a disaster environmentally for the drinking water on which 250,000 Monmouth County residents depend. That's the American Water Company.
Yeah.
And also we need to protect the Manasquan watershed for the same reason. So we decided, I was able to persuade my colleagues on the Board of Freeholders, including the Republicans, and Harry Larison, of course, was the main Republican on the board, that we should acquire this property and preserve it to protect the reservoir, and the board did go along with doing that. We had, at that time, occasional meetings in other towns other than Freehold. And so we had, coming up at that time when this was happening, a meeting in Homedale. So before that meeting, we received some threats from some of the realtors representing the developers that they were going to protest what we were doing at the meeting. We get to Homedale. It was in a high school because there were hundreds and hundreds of people in attendance. And the realtors did their spiel, but they were outnumbered by the environmentalists and those people like you who wanted to preserve open space and the quality of life.
Yeah.
And so after they spoke, I expressed, and so did some of my colleagues, interest in preserving as much as we could. And then one of the realtors said, well, if that's what you mean, if that's what you really want to do, I'm representing a client who's selling the Doorbrook farm on the southern border of the reservoir. And Harry Larison said, well, we'll buy that too.
Doorbrook Park, right?
Doorbrook Park.
That's great.
It is.
Yeah. So that was my orientation and my work when I was on the Board of Freeholders. And then when I was in the state Senate, to the consternation of Joe Palea, who was my opponent, I was the sponsor of an open space bond issue and also a bond issue for the elimination of combined storm sewer outflows. And the voters did approve that. So I was proud of having able to propose that. Then afterwards, after I was retired from political life, I was invited to become a member of the Friends of the Monmouth County Parks. And I've been on that board for actually over 20 years now.
So you've always, I guess, had a reputation, and just from talking to you here and knowing you, you seem like a pure, you've been in politics. Politics is a dirty game, generally speaking. It's thought of. How are you able to navigate that, go into the parole board and get rid of the corruption there with that mandate, kind of go into these things, and you just seem like a pure politician. How does that work? How is one a successful politician but also pure in this way?
Well, I thank my father for inspiring me to serve the public.
Yeah.
And I thank my studies in the Bible Study Fellowship for ingraining in me Christian values, by which I mean don't sin.
Right.
And don't grab property that doesn't belong to you, and don't expect favors, and don't extract money for public actions. I remember one time one of the Democrats that was actually the clerk of the Board of County Commissioners at the time I was on was walking with me, and he said, "John, I hear that you're going to be moving to Rumson, that you're getting a nice big house in Rumson." And I said to him, "I never heard that."
Yeah.
What are you talking about? "Oh, yeah, no, I heard that was coming down the pike." Not on my watch.
Yeah.
And of course, it never happened because I reamed him up and down.
Yeah.
And said, "No, I'm not in public life for aggrandizement."
Yeah. Talk about that, because Jersey does, in some circles, have a reputation for that. I mean, I've never really seen it in my career. I've never heard of a judge being paid off directly from friends or anything personal kind of thing. I've never really seen it. Certainly, I've seen what I view as incorrect rulings from judges, but I've never seen improper influence. I've heard about it, but is that? I mean,
I did have a.
Are there more John D'Amicos out there, or are you the exception?
I think so. I think, especially the judiciary, I think
Yes.
is populated with very honest and hardworking people who are trying to do the right thing.
And we have a great ethics code too that's required by the judges. There's
We
a lot of
do.
musts and shalls.
I say in my book that the New Jersey Code of Ethics should be adopted by the U.S. Supreme Court.
Oh gosh.
But that's another issue.
So you never had a litigant let you borrow their private jet for a weekend?
Not at all. I remember one family.
Does your wife fly a flag out in front of your house?
I remember one divorce trial where someone that had supported me politically in my county races called me and tried to influence me about one of the litigants in the case, and I told him, "Look, I just can't do it. I can't even hear this discussion."
Right.
And so I hung up. And you just cannot do the job right if you're going to be venal. Let's put it that way.
Did you like the power of being a judge and the power of those positions? Is that something that, or
No,
because we see that in Jersey a lot, where you get a bureaucrat gets a little power, the guy at the garbage dump or something, or I don't know, just someone gets a little bit of power, and then the next thing
Put your cardboard in that bin.
Yeah. And then the next thing you know is surfers being body slammed and arrested for surfing in the beach. Like, what about that?
No, I was never in public office or in the judiciary or in the executive branch in order to exercise power or to make money. My idea was to serve the public and do the best I could to do the right thing.
Just simple as that.
That's it.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah, we need more of that.
Well, and I think we have a lot of people. I like our new Senator Andy Kim.
Yeah.
I think exemplifies, unlike some of his predecessors, those qualities, and that's what we need more of.
So
in
he's got
public
no
life.
gold bars in the basement anyway.
No, and the irony is that I worked with Bob Menendez when he was in the Assembly and I was in the Senate. New York was taxing New Jersey commuters who worked in New York, and we got involved in a major tax battle with the state of New York, and we proposed countermeasures which ultimately forced New York to back down. And I worked with him very well on that. I mean, he was a hardworking, effective legislator during the time that I knew him.
Yeah.
I was very sad when I saw how he went off the rails.
I think it feels like there's a thing when someone gets power that they say power corrupts.
Absolute
Power corrupts, absolutely. Lord Acton, yeah.
And you see that. Like, you also see it, like, sometimes you had some of those Southern preachers, and then they would have the scandals, but they all started off legit. And then there's something with power and time in office and You know, who was the guy with the FBI that was like the most powerful guy in the country for like 30 years? FBI, you know.
Hoover.
Hoover. J. Hoover, yeah. You know?
Yeah, well, you know, the devil is out there trying to ruin lives. And what Bible Study Fellowship has taught me is that I should resist any temptations and try not to sin.
I mean, you have some stories in your book. We're not going into them, but about the love triangles, and then this guy that you knew, and then he runs into the restaurants, and my wife was killed, and I mean, we don't need to go into that. Get the book, but that's a crazy story as well.
Yeah, I was just very briefly one of my running mates for council in Oceanport in 1981. Was not getting out and campaigning like I was with Tom Cavanaugh, who eventually became mayor and a judge. So where is Walter, we were wondering.
He's running around.
And he was running around with our former babysitter.
Yes.
And she was a very attractive young woman, and they had an affair, a couple of abortions and so forth, and ultimately conspired to murder Walter's wife.
Yeah, that whole story's in the book.
He only lost the election by 75 votes. He was a very strange episode.
Yeah, and you talk about Santos and the convictions, and if our leaders are espousing bad stuff, they're going to attract bad stuff, and bad people are going to get into office. So do you have some sort of like closing thoughts in terms of, we talked about democracy and concerns about the democracy, and when I was reading your book, one of the things you said is like when we had the attack on the Capitol, I'm like, you know, and when we have people talking about totally anti-democratic things, I'm like, did you fail civics class? Like, don't you know, like, American democracy 101 to, you know, so.
Well, what happened was that civics classes failed America, by which I mean that they don't really teach students in grammar school and high school the basics of civics. When I was in the 11th grade at Red Bank High School, our teacher for social studies was Elizabeth Kelly. The first question she asked on the first day of class was, what are the basic principles of democracy? And of course, none of us 11th graders could answer that question. And the entire year was spent discussing, analyzing, and memorizing the basic principles of democracy. And I write about this in my book, and I give her list of the basic principles in the appendix. And the point here is that civics education must be greatly improved and reformed throughout the country. To his credit, Governor Phil Murphy did sign into law a recent mandate that civics education be improved in our schools in New Jersey. And Colorado, in particular, has an excellent curriculum, but we need to do a lot better throughout the country in all of the states to teach basic principles of democracy and the basic responsibilities of citizenship, which include participation, voting, and doing all that we can to improve our society.
That's awesome. So any parting advice to the newbies coming up, whether they want to aspire in politics or law or just community leadership or anything that they want to do? One
sentence.
Yeah.
Follow Jesus and Socrates.
All right.
I like that. Yeah. Thank you, Judge.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah.
Great.
That's it. Thank you for your time.
Oh, my. It was enjoyable.
Appreciate it.
Great conversation. Thank you.
Oh, one other thing before we go. Before we go. My dad had his 99th birthday recently. He's all up there. He's still got it upstairs, and he's a fan of the podcast. So give him a little shout out. I know.
Bill, I miss you, and I thank you for introducing your son to me, and I wish you every very good thing.
Awesome. Thank you.